Have you ever walked through a place that should be full of life, but isn't? A school after hours, an office building at 3 a.m., an airport terminal closed for the night. There's something profoundly wrong about spaces designed for crowds when they're empty. They become something else. Something that watches, something that waits. Welcome to After Dark Horrors. Tonight's account comes from someone who spent 6 months guarding such a place. The Westfield Shopping Center, though that wasn't its real name, had been the heart of a small Midwestern city for 40 years. 3 floors, 200 stores, a food court that could seat 800 people. It closed in 2019, another casualty of changing shopping habits and online retail. But buildings don't die just because we stop using them. They continue. They evolve. And sometimes they become home to things that shouldn't exist. Our narrator, we'll call them Alex, took a job as a night security guard at this abandoned mall in early 2023. The pay was good. Too good in retrospect. The job seemed simple. Walk the rounds, check the doors, make sure no one was squatting or stealing copper wire. For 5 months, it was exactly that simple. Then they discovered the food court wasn't as empty as everyone thought. What you're about to hear is their account, compiled from security reports, personal recordings, and the extensive video evidence they collected before they quit, before they ran, before they realized that some places aren't abandoned, they're quarantined. So, lock your doors, check your windows, and remember, the next time you pass by an empty building at night and wonder what's inside, sometimes it's better not to know. This is After Dark Horrors, and this is what was living in the food court. My name doesn't matter, but you can call me Alex. I need to tell this story, even though I signed papers saying I wouldn't, even though the property management company paid me a considerable sum to keep quiet, because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand why that mall is still closed, why it's scheduled for demolition next month, and why they're going to fill the entire basement with concrete before they tear it down. I took the job in February 2023. I'd been unemployed for 3 months after the warehouse I worked at shut down. The posting appeared on a job board, night security for a closed shopping center, $32 an hour. That should have been my first warning. Nobody pays that much for a guard to watch an empty building in the Midwest. The interview was strange. It wasn't really an interview at all. A woman named Ms. Chen from Apex Property Management met me at a coffee shop. She looked at my resume for maybe 10 seconds. Have you ever had any experiences with... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Unusual phenomena? Like what? Unexplained noises, visual disturbances, feelings of being watched. No, nothing like that, she nodded, seemingly satisfied. The position is yours if you want it, midnight to 8 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. The mall has been closed for 4 years. Your job is to patrol the building, ensure no one breaks in, and submit a report each morning. That's it? That's it. Though I should mention, we've had trouble keeping guards. The isolation gets to some people. The building is extensive. 3 floors, 2 underground parking levels. It can be overwhelming. Why is the pay so high? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Retention incentive. As I said, we've had trouble keeping guards. Most quit within a month. Stay 6 months, and there's a $10,000 bonus. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why they had trouble keeping guards at a job that paid almost $70,000 a year to walk around an empty building. But I needed the money, and honestly, I've always been a night owl. The idea of having a huge, empty mall all to myself sounded kind of cool. The Westfield Shopping Center sat on the edge of town, surrounded by empty parking lots that could hold 5,000 cars. It was a massive brown brick structure that looked like it had been designed in the 80s and never updated. 3 stories tall, with 2 anchor department stores on either end. Both had been empty even before the mall closed. Ms. Chen met me there on my first night to give me the tour and keys. We entered through a service door near the old Sears. The moment we stepped inside, I understood why people quit. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was aggressive. It pressed against your eardrums. Our footsteps echoed endlessly down the empty corridors. The building still has power, Ms. Chen explained, her voice seeming too loud in the emptiness. But to save money, only emergency lighting is on at night. You'll have a flashlight, of course. The emergency lighting cast everything in a sick, greenish glow. Storefronts stood empty behind security gates, their signs removed, leaving ghost lettering on the walls where the sun hadn't faded the paint. Escalators stood frozen like metal waterfalls. Plants in concrete planters had long since died, leaving skeletal remains reaching toward skylights black with night. Your main patrol route, Miss Chen continued, leading me through the main corridor, covers all 3 floors, both parking levels and the service areas. It takes about 2 hours to complete a full circuit if you're thorough. You're required to do at least 3 circuits per shift. We reached the center of the mall where the 3 floors opened up into a massive atrium. Dead trees and huge planters surrounded what had once been a fountain, now dry and filled with dust. Above, a pyramidal skylight showed nothing but darkness. This is the main court. The food court is on the 2nd level, through there. She pointed to an escalator leading up. You'll need to check it, but... She trailed off. But what? Some guards have reported sounds from that area. Probably just the building settling, or animals that got in somehow. The maintenance team checks monthly and never finds anything. We went up the frozen escalator. The food court was enormous, designed in a semicircle with 20 different restaurant stalls around the perimeter. In the center, hundreds of tables and chairs sat empty, covered in a fine layer of dust. The individual restaurants were all closed off with metal gates. Their signs dark: Subway, Panda Express, Sparrow, Auntie Anne's, and others I couldn't make out in the dim light. Eddie, is that? I pointed to the far end where something seemed to move in the shadows. Reflection, Ms. Chen said quickly. Too quickly. The emergency lights can play tricks. You'll get used to it. She showed me the security office, a small room on the 1st floor with banks of monitors, showing feeds from cameras throughout the mall. Half of them were dead, showing only static. Budget cuts, she explained. But the main areas are covered. This is where you'll write your reports. She handed me a ring of keys that must have weighed 5 pounds. Every door in the building? The red-tagged ones are for areas you don't need to patrol. Old storage, maintenance tunnels, that sort of thing. Questions? What exactly am I looking for? Trespassers, vandals, vagrants, signs of forced entry. Anything unusual? Unusual like what? She looked at me for a long moment. You'll know it if you see it. First shift starts tomorrow night. Don't be late. The first week was exactly what you'd expect. Boring. I'd arrive at midnight, do my first patrol, then sit in the security office scrolling my phone until it was time for the 2nd patrol around 3 a.m. The final patrol at 6 a.m. Then write up a report that always said the same thing. All clear. No incidents. The building had its quirks. Sounds, mostly. Metal contracting in the cold. Wind whistling through ventilation shafts. The occasional bang or crash that would make me jump. But I'd investigate and find nothing. Just an empty building doing empty building things. By the 2nd week, I developed a routine. I'd vary my patrol routes to keep from getting too bored. Sometimes I'd start at the top floor and work down. Sometimes I'd do the perimeter first. I began to know every store, every corridor, every emergency exit. There were areas that felt wrong, though. The old Spencer's department store on the East End was particularly unsettling. It was 2 stories of absolute darkness. The emergency lights didn't extend into the anchor stores. My flashlight beam would get swallowed up in that vastness. I'd shine it around, seeing glimpses of old fixtures, mannequin parts, scattered hangers, but never the far walls. It was like staring into the void. The basement levels were worse. The parking garages were at least open and straightforward, but there were service tunnels down there, narrow corridors that connected loading docks, storage areas, and utility rooms. The air was different, thick and stale, with an underlying smell I couldn't identify. Sweet, but wrong, like fruit that had gone too ripe. But it was the food court that bothered me most. During my third week, I started hearing things up there. Not the building settling or wind through vents. These were specific sounds. Metallic clinks, shuffling. Once I swore I heard humming, a tune I didn't recognize coming from somewhere near the old Chinese restaurant. I'd investigate, of course. That was my job. I'd walk the entire food court, shine my light into every corner, check behind every overturned table. Nothing, always nothing. But the sounds would continue after I left. I could hear them from the main court below, echoing down through the dead mall. I started avoiding that area, only checking it once per shift, moving through as quickly as possible. The fourth week, things escalated. I was doing my 3 a.m. patrol, walking past the frozen escalator to the second floor, when I heard it clearly, the sound of a chair scraping across tile. Not like it had fallen or been bumped, like someone had pulled it out to sit down. I stood at the food court entrance, flashlight in hand, listening. Silence, but a different kind of silence. The expectant kind, like something was holding its breath. "Security," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Anyone there?" No response. I swept my flashlight across the seating area. All the chairs were exactly where they'd been before. Or were they? In the dim light, with hundreds of identical plastic chairs, how could I really tell? I walked the perimeter, checking each restaurant stall. All locked. All empty, all dark, but when I reached the old Sparrow, I stopped. There was a smell, not the stale, dusty smell that permeated the rest of the mall. This was fresh. It smelled like pizza. Like someone had just heated up a slice. That's when I saw it. On the counter inside the locked Sparrow, barely visible through the metal gate, a paper plate. And on that plate, the unmistakable triangle shape of a pizza slice. Steam was rising from it. I fumbled for my keys, found the one for Sparrow's gate. My hands were shaking. The gate rolled up with a thunderous rattle that echoed through the empty food court. I stepped inside. Flashlight trained on the plate. It was definitely pizza. Fresh, hot. The cheese was still bubbling. I backed out of the stall, not turning around, keeping my light on that impossible slice of pizza. My hand found my radio. "This is Alex at Westfield. I need..." The radio was dead. Not static, dead, like the battery had been removed. I heard footsteps above me. The food court had a small third-level mezzanine that had once held additional seating. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. They stopped directly overhead. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran down the frozen escalator, through the main court, past the dead fountain, all the way to the security office. I slammed the door behind me and looked at the monitors. The food court camera showed nothing. Just empty tables and chairs. The Sparrow gate was closed. No plate, no pizza, no steam. I sat there until dawn, replaying what I'd seen, what I'd heard. When I wrote my report, I hesitated. Then I wrote, "Heard noises in food court, investigated, found nothing." I should have quit that night. I should have walked out and never come back. But $32 an hour is hard to walk away from, and part of me, the stupid part, wanted to know what was happening. That was my first month. It got worse. March arrived with a late winter storm that dumped 2 feet of snow on the city. The mall's parking lot became an ocean of white, unmarked by any tracks except my own leading from my car to the service door. The isolation felt complete. I was alone in a dead building, while the world outside was buried in silence. It was during this storm, my 5th week on the job, that I first saw evidence that I wasn't alone. I was doing my midnight patrol, starting from the basement as I sometimes did. The service tunnels were especially oppressive that night. My breath came out in clouds. The heating was minimal down there, just enough to keep the pipes from freezing. I was walking past a storage room when my flashlight caught something that made me stop. Footprints in the dust. Fresh ones, leading from the storage room door down the corridor toward the freight elevator. But here's what made my skin crawl. They weren't human footprints. They were too large, too long, with what looked like an extra joint in the middle, like someone walking on their toes but with feet that bent in ways feet shouldn't bend. I followed them to the freight elevator. The doors were closed, but there was a smear on the metal, something dark and viscous, like oil but thicker. It had a smell, that same sweet, wrong smell I'd noticed before, but stronger. It made my stomach turn. The elevator shouldn't have been working. Ms. Chen had told me they'd all been shut down to save on maintenance, but when I pressed the call button just to check, it illuminated. The machinery groaned to life somewhere above me. The numbers above the door lit up. 3, 2, 1. B, the doors opened. The elevator car was empty, except for more of those footprints leading from the back corner to the doors. And on the back wall, about 7 feet up, there were scratches in the metal. 4 parallel lines, repeated over and over, like something had been trying to claw its way out. I didn't get in. I took the stairs. The footprints in the dust became my obsession. I started finding them everywhere, in corridors I'd just patrolled, in stores that had been locked for years, in impossible places like the inside of air vents. I could see them through the grates. They didn't follow logical paths. They'd start in the middle of a hallway, continue for 20 feet, then stop. No origin, no destination. I tried to document them. I took hundreds of photos on my phone. But when I'd review them later, the footprints were never visible. The flash would wash out the dust, or the angle would be wrong, or the image would be inexplicably corrupted. It was like whatever was making them didn't want to be documented. The noises in the food court grew bolder, not just chairs scraping now, but conversations, muffled, indistinct, like hearing a TV through a wall. Multiple voices, laughing, chatting, the clink of silverware on plates. The sounds of life in a place that had been dead for 4 years. One night, I decided to be systematic about it. I positioned myself on the first floor where I could see the food court entrance above. I sat there for my entire shift, just watching. Around 2 a.m. I saw lights. Not the emergency lighting. These were warm, yellow lights, like the overhead fixtures in the restaurants had turned on. The conversation sounds grew louder. I could smell food. Burgers, pizza, Chinese food, pretzels, all mixing together in an impossible cacophony of scents. I crept up the stopped escalator, staying low. As I reached the top, the sounds were clear. It was like the food court was fully operational. I could hear orders being called out, cash registers ringing, the sizzle of grills. I peered around the corner. The food court was empty, dark, silent. The smells vanished instantly, replaced by that sweet, rotten undertone, but the chairs had moved. I was certain of it. They were arranged differently. Some pulled out from tables, some stacked in corners, some flipped upside down. In the center of the seating area, one table was set, a tray with fresh food, a burger, fries, a drink with condensation on the cup. Steam rose from the fries. The burger had one bite taken out of it. I approached slowly, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The food was real. I could touch it. The fries were hot, crispy. The Coke was cold, fizzing. The burger was exactly medium rare, juices still dripping. On the tray was a receipt from the McDonald's that had been closed for 4 years. The timestamp showed today's date, 2:17 a.m. Hello? I called out. My voice seemed to be absorbed by the darkness. I know someone's here. I'm not going to call the cops. I need to know what's happening. The lights in the old subway flickered on. then off, then the Panda Express, then the Taco Bell. One by one, each restaurant's lights flashed in sequence around the semicircle like a chase pattern. When it completed the circle, all the lights came on at once, blindingly bright. I saw it then. Him, them, it. In every restaurant stall, behind every counter, figures were working. They looked human from a distance, wearing the uniforms of their respective restaurants, moving with purpose, cooking, preparing, serving. But they were wrong. Their movements were too fluid, like they had no bones. Their faces were unfinished, like someone had sculpted features from memory, but forgotten the details. Smooth where there should be wrinkles, flat where there should be depth, and they were all looking at me. The one in the subway waved. Its arm bent in 3 places during the gesture. The lights went out. All of them, even the emergency lighting, failed. I was in absolute darkness. I heard them moving. All of them, the sound of many bodies shifting, stepping out from behind counters, moving across the food court floor toward me. That sweet, rotten smell grew overwhelming. I ran blind. Muscle memory guided me to the escalator. I fell down the last few steps, my knee exploding in pain. I limped through the main court, using the walls to guide me. The emergency lights flickered back on just as I reached the security office. On the monitors, the food court was empty. But on the table where the tray had been, something was written in what looked like ketchup. Thank you for visiting. I didn't finish my shift. I left at 3 a.m., speeding through the snow-covered streets, my knee throbbing, my mind reeling. I called in sick for the next 2 nights, seriously considering never going back. But on the 3rd day, Ms. Chen called. Alex, we need to discuss your recent reports, or rather, the lack of detail in them. Our maintenance team investigated the food court based on your notes about noises. They found evidence of habitation. Habitation? Someone has been living in the mall, Alex, possibly multiple someones. There are fresh food wrappers, makeshift bedding in the service areas, and signs that someone has been tapping into the electrical system. This is exactly what we hired you to prevent. I haven't seen any people. Then you haven't been doing your job properly. We're doubling your pay for the next month, $64 an hour. But we need results. We need these trespassers found and removed. If you can't handle it, we'll find someone who can. $64 an hour. Over $10,000 a month, plus the bonus if I made it to 6 months. It was insane money for a security guard. I'll find them, I heard myself say. Good. And Alex, start checking the service tunnels more thoroughly. That's likely where they're hiding during your patrols. She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, knowing that whatever was in that mall wasn't a group of squatters, knowing that Ms. Chen probably knew that too, knowing that the money was danger pay for something the property company couldn't or wouldn't explain. I went back that night. God help me, I went back. The money was only part of why I returned. The real reason was simpler and more foolish. I needed to know. The not knowing was worse than the fear. It followed me home, invaded my dreams, made me question my own sanity. At least at the mall, the impossibility was contained. It had rules, even if I didn't understand them. I arrived that night with a plan. I brought better equipment, a high-powered tactical flashlight, a GoPro camera strapped to my chest, protein bars, and bottled water. If I was going to find answers, I needed to be prepared for a long night. I started in the service tunnels, as Ms. Chen had suggested. But this time, I wasn't just walking through. I was hunting. The tunnels formed a maze beneath them all, some connected to the loading docks where trucks once delivered merchandise. Others led to mechanical rooms housing the building's massive HVAC systems. Still others seemed to serve no purpose, dead-ending at concrete walls or locked doors with no keys on my ring. It was in one of these dead ends that I found the first real clue. The tunnel was narrower than the others, older. The walls were concrete but different, rougher, like they'd been poured decades before the rest. At the end was a door, metal, painted industrial green, with no handle, just a keyhole. None of my keys fit, but the door was warm. In a basement where my breath came out in clouds, this door was warm to the touch. I pressed my ear against it. I could hear something on the other side. A rhythmic sound, like breathing but bigger, like the whole room was inhaling and exhaling. There were scratches on the floor in front of the door. Not random, deliberate. Symbols or letters in a language I didn't recognize. They hurt to look at, like my brain couldn't process their geometry. I took photos. These ones didn't corrupt. I wish they had. I followed the tunnel back but took a different turn, trying to map out where that warm door might lead. The architecture didn't make sense. According to my mental map, that room should have been directly under the food court, but the food court was on the second floor. There should have been the first floor, then parking levels. Between it and any basement room, unless the room wasn't part of the original construction, I found myself in a section of the basement I'd never explored. The concrete here was definitely older, stained with moisture and something else. Dark streaks that could have been mold or could have been something worse. The ceiling was lower, making me hunch as I walked. Then I found the photographs. They were tacked to a bulletin board in what had once been a maintenance break room. Old photos, some black and white, some faded color from the 70s or 80s. They all showed the mall during construction and through various renovations. But in every photo, there was something wrong, a shadow where no shadow should be. A figure in the background that was too tall, too thin, limbs at wrong angles. All was blurry, all was partially hidden, but undeniably there, watching the construction, present at every stage of the mall's development. One photo from 1983 showed the grand opening of the food court. Crowds of people, bright lights, colorful storefronts. But in the background, standing behind the Sparrow, was one of those things I'd seen. The smooth, unfinished face, the uniform that moved like it was part of its body. It was serving pizza to customers who didn't seem to notice anything wrong. The last photo was dated 2019. The mall's closing ceremony. A small gathering of people, the mayor giving a speech. And scattered throughout the crowd, at least a dozen of those things, standing, watching, waiting. I pulled the photos off the board, stuffed them in my pocket, evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. That's when I heard the footsteps above me. Not in the mall proper, in the tunnels. Multiple sets moving fast, converging on my location. I ran deeper into the old section, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. Behind me, the footsteps grew closer, and voices, not human voices. They sounded like someone trying to speak through water, gurgling and distorted. I turned a corner and found myself at another door. This one was wooden, ancient, with iron hinges that belonged in a medieval castle, not a shopping mall basement. It was cracked open, warm air flowing out carrying that sweet, rotting smell. The footsteps were right behind me. I had no choice. I pushed through the door. The room beyond defied physics. It was massive, larger than should have been possible given the structure above. The ceiling stretched up into darkness. The walls were covered in what looked like flesh, pink, glistening, pulsing with veins of light. And in the center of the room was the source of the breathing sound. It wasn't a creature. It was a mass, an amalgamation of organic matter that rose and fell with each breath. Within it, I could see things suspended like insects in amber. Cash registers, food court tables, mannequins from the department stores, all absorbed, integrated into this living architecture, and people, or what had been people. Dozens of them partially merged with the mass, their faces peaceful, eyes closed. Some wore mall employee uniforms from different eras. Others were in street clothes. All were being slowly digested, dissolved, absorbed, but they were still alive. I could see their chests rising and falling in sync with the creatures breathing. Beautiful, isn't it? I spun around. Ms. Chen stood in the doorway, but not the Ms. Chen I knew. This version was older, her skin translucent, her movements too fluid. One of them, We've been here so much longer than your kind, she said, her voice layering over itself like multiple people speaking in unison. We were here when this was forest. We were here when they built the first trading post. We adapted when they poured the concrete for this temple of commerce. What are you? Survivors, adapters. Your kind builds, we inhabit. Your kind abandons, we remain. The mall fed us for 40 years, all those humans, their energy, their desires, their consumption. We fed on the excess, the waste, the forgotten food, the lost children, the broken dreams. The employees in the photos, some joined willingly. Others were chosen. All became part of the ecosystem. The mall was alive, Alex, truly alive, a symbiotic relationship. We maintained it, cleaned it, even served in it. And in exchange, it fed us. But the mall closed. Bodies can survive without food for a time. We went dormant, sleeping, waiting. But then they sent guards. Fresh energy, fresh possibilities. Most ran when they sensed us. But you stayed. You engaged. You fed us with your fear, your curiosity. You made us strong enough to wake fully. The mass behind her pulsed. And I saw someone I recognized among the absorbed faces. Johnson, the guard who'd had this job before me. His eyes opened, looked at me pleading. Join us, Alex, Miss Chen said, stepping closer. The demolition is coming. They're going to destroy this place. But if we have enough energy, enough biomass, we can spread. Move to a new building, a hospital, an airport, somewhere with even more food. You're parasites. We're survivors. You're just like you. Don't you want to survive? To be part of something greater? The things from the food court entered the room behind her. Dozens of them, all looking at me with their unfinished faces. I backed toward the breathing mass. It was warm, almost comforting. It would be so easy to just lean back, let it embrace me, become part of something that would outlive any human lifetime. That's when I remembered the photos in my pocket. Evidence, proof, and a responsibility to warn others. I pulled out my lighter. I don't even smoke, but I'd started carrying it for comfort in the dark. I held it to the old photos. Don't! Ms. Chen lurched forward, suddenly desperate. The photos caught fire immediately, burning with an intensity that shouldn't have been possible. The flames were bright white, spreading to my hand, but not burning me. The creatures in the room recoiled, their forms beginning to melt and shift. The images hold us. Ms. Chen screamed, her face sliding off like a mask. The documentation binds us to this form. I threw the burning photos at the mass. Where they touched, the flesh blackened and crumbled. The absorbed people began falling out, gasping, awakening from their integration. Johnson collapsed at my feet, breathing but unconscious. The room shook. The walls began to crack, revealing the normal concrete behind the organic facade. The mass let out a sound that was felt more than heard, a vibration that made my bones ache. I grabbed Johnson, throwing his arm over my shoulder, and ran. The creatures didn't follow. They were too busy trying to hold their forms together as whatever binding the photos had provided dissolved. I dragged Johnson through the tunnels, up the stairs, out of the mall. My car was still running. I'd left it that way, engine heating against the cold. I threw Johnson in the back and drove to the nearest hospital. The hospital admitted Johnson immediately. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and something they couldn't identify. His cellular structure had been partially altered, they said. He was in a coma for 3 days. When he woke, he had no memory of the past 2 months. I didn't go back to the mall. I called Ms. Chen's number, but it was disconnected. I called Apex Property Management. They had no record of a Ms. Chen, no record of hiring me, no record of the Westfield Shopping Center being in their portfolio. But the direct deposits were real. The money in my bank account was real. 3 days after I rescued Johnson, I got a call from an unknown number. Alex? The voice was male, older, professionally warm. My name is Director Harrison. I'm with a government agency you've never heard of. We need to discuss what you saw at the Westfield Shopping Center. I don't know what you're talking about. The photos you burned. The entity in the basement, Ms. Chen. We know about all of it. We've been monitoring the situation. You did well, better than we expected. The binding ritual with the photographs was particularly clever, even if accidental. Who are you people? We're the ones who make sure things like what you encountered don't spread. The mall is being demolished next week. The basement will be filled with concrete mixed with certain additives that will prevent regeneration. The site will be salted and monitored. And the things, the creatures, contained for now, weakened. They'll go dormant again, hopefully for decades. By then, we'll have better containment procedures. Why was I really hired? You weren't, not by us. The entities hired you. They needed fresh energy to fully wake. But they chose poorly. Most guards just run. You investigated. You documented. You fought back. So what now? Now you have a choice. Walk away with a substantial sum of money and never speak of this again, or join us. We have other sites, other entities, other mysteries that need investigating. The pay is excellent, the work is dangerous, and the retirement plan is generous for those who survive long enough to use it. I thought about the breathing mass in the basement, the faces in the food court, the impossible geometry of that ancient door. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. But Alex, that mall isn't unique. There are things like that in every city, every town, old things that have learned to hide in plain sight. Someone needs to watch them. Someone needs to keep them contained. He gave me a number to call when I'd made my decision and hung up. That was 6 months ago. I took the job. My current assignment has me watching an abandoned hospital in Portland. The things here are different. They don't pretend to be human. They're more honest about what they are. In some ways, that's worse. But I've learned things. Learned that fire disrupts them. That documentation, photos, videos, written accounts, can bind them to physical laws. That they feed on human energy but can be starved into dormancy. Most importantly, I've learned that they're everywhere. In abandoned malls, empty hotels, closed schools, derelict factories. Anywhere humans once gathered in numbers and then abandoned. They move in, adapt. Wait, the Westfield Shopping Center was demolished last month. The local news covered it, a brief segment about the end of an era, the changing face of retail. They interviewed old shoppers reminiscing about better days. No one mentioned the food court that served impossible meals. No one mentioned the mass in the basement. No one mentioned the things wearing human faces, but I know. Johnson knows even if he doesn't remember. And now you know. The next time you pass an abandoned building, especially one that once held crowds, remember this. Emptiness is never really empty. Something is always waiting to fill the void. Something that has learned to mimic what was there before. Something that's very, very patient. And if you ever take a job as a night security guard at such a place, and the pay seems too good to be true, remember my story. Remember what was living in the food court. The following was transcribed from a voice recording found on Alex's phone, dated 3 weeks after the events described above, just before they took the government job. This is Alex. It's 3:47 a.m. and I can't sleep. I need to add something to my account, something I didn't include in the official report. The night I burned the photos and escaped with Johnson, I left something out. When I was supporting Johnson, helping him walk through those tunnels, he said something. He was barely conscious, mumbling, but I heard it clearly. They're not gone. They're spreading. Every mall, every store, every place of gathering. They're already there, waiting. The economy isn't killing these places. They are. They're making us abandon them so they can feed. I thought it was delirium. But then I started researching. The number of abandoned malls in America has tripled in the last decade. Retail apocalypse, they call it. Changing shopping habits, Amazon, COVID. But what if that's not the real reason? What if something is intentionally killing these places, creating abandoned spaces for things to inhabit? I drove past Westfield again last night. I know I shouldn't have, but I had to see. The demolition is scheduled for tomorrow. The building is wrapped in caution tape, surrounded by concrete barriers, but I saw lights in the food court. and shadows moving behind them. They're still there, weaker maybe, but still there. I think Director Harrison knows this. I think that's why they're really demolishing it. Not to contain them, but to force them to move, to spread to smaller, less monitored locations. I think we're losing this war, and most people don't even know we're fighting it. Tomorrow, I start my new job. I'll be watching, documenting, containing, but I wonder if I'm really protecting humanity, or if I'm just managing our slow retreat. If you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, do me a favor. Pay attention to the abandoned places in your town. Notice when stores close suddenly, when buildings are vacated without explanation. Watch for the patterns, and whatever you do, never go into these places alone, never at night. And never, ever, if the pay seems too good to be true, they're not abandoned. They're incubating. Alex's story ends there. They took the government position and have been working in that capacity ever since. The photos they mentioned were never recovered. The Westfield Shopping Center was demolished on schedule, though construction workers reported strange incidents, tools moving on their own, shadows in peripheral vision, and several workers claiming they heard a food court in full operation beneath the rubble. The site is now a parking lot for a new medical complex, but employees who work late report smelling food that isn't there: pizza, Chinese food, pretzels. Security cameras occasionally capture shadows moving across the lot in patterns that match the old mall's layout. If Alex's account is true, if these entities exist, then we need to reconsider every abandoned building, every dead mall, every empty store. Are they really empty, or are they simply waiting? This has been After Dark Horrors. If you've had an experience in an abandoned building, if you've taken a job that seemed too good to be true, or if you've noticed patterns in the closures around your town, contact us. Your story might be the puzzle piece that helps us understand what's happening. Until next time, stay out of abandoned places. Check the locks on your doors. And remember, in the dark, empty spaces of our world, something is always watching. Something is always hungry. Something is always waiting for us to return.